For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss the persistence of national oppression in South Africa. Welcome.
Thank you.
Why have you found it necessary to re-emphasize the national or racial oppression and its link with class exploitation?
See, when I look around me, as I said in the article, I see things that I saw under apartheid. Now, we're not under apartheid. Very many things have changed under apartheid, but I still see the same people, the same categories of people experiencing oppression, lying down in the streets, being frisked, lying dead, or having their homes demolished, a range of things that are very similar, if not the same, as under apartheid. And I tried to ask myself, what exactly is this? And I tried also in the article to revive a way of understanding the relationship between what we used to call national or racial oppression and class exploitation. The fact that when black people entered the workplace under apartheid, especially Africans, they had special disabilities. The pass laws and similar laws and contract labor meant that it was easier to give them starvation wages than free laborers. Now, what I've argued there is that people have the vote. There have been many changes. Many people do have water, despite the protests about water. Many people have water who never had it before, or electricity. But the same people, where you see protests about these things, you see a repeat of a pattern of the past, where instead of listening to the grievances and negotiating how to deal with it, the police are called in and violence breaks out. So I've tried to show, and this is something that people have observed from America, people like Angela Davis have argued that even under the first African-American president in United States history, more African-Americans are in jail, proportionately speaking, and Latinos and others, or dying at the hands of police or other illegal forms or illegal forms of violence than happened before. So the question that Angela Davis asks about racial profiling, whether there is still a sense that the person who is likely to be a criminal, who you've got to actually watch, is a black person, doesn't still remain in South Africa today, and isn't in fact acted out in terms of the spatial segregation, the fact that whites continue to live primarily in the best suburbs and black people still in the slums. Now, those are a few of the examples which made me think we have to ask ourselves, has national oppression not persisted, albeit under majority rule government?
You refer to lawless actions of the ANC in KZN as well as to the DA. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, you know, in KZN, you have a situation where courts have declared that they cannot demolish shacks, and the Constitutional Court has, and the Constitution really backs the idea that you can't evict someone from a place unless they have alternative accommodation, and they've constantly illegally done this. Now, in KZN, Abahlali Basin John Dolo made electoral pact with the DA to get the DA to support them in the face of these illegal actions of the ANC and the eThekwini municipality. But in the Western Cape, the DA does the same thing, as happened in the Rwanda evictions. And unlike their actions in KZN, the ANC is outraged by what happened in the Western Cape, and Lindiwe Sisulu appointed a commission into Rwanda. So what you have is that there is no example set either by the ANC-led government or by the DA-led government in the Western Cape, both of them equally contemptuous of the poor, contemptuous of the rights under the Constitution that are accorded to the poor. And I mean, related to the earlier question, you have Lindiwe Sisulu saying that no one under 40 has suffered national oppression. And one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is, can the effects of national oppression not be affecting someone who is under 40 years of age, who has grown up in surroundings which are much less advantageous than that of a person who's come from a wealthier or a non-African or non-black environment. So the lawlessness is not restricted to the ANC. It's also found in the Western Cape, and they both attack one another's evictions.
What is the role of the black capitalist class, and has it no special ties to the black poor?
You know, you have this philanthropy of people like Motsepe, and I think at times Cyril Ramaphosa has set up schools and things like that. But I think the way in which the black capitalist class has developed, especially the African capitalist class, was initially through borrowing a lot of money on the expectation that shares would rise. And then when shares, in fact, went down, they got themselves into a lot of debt. And many of the initial attempts to establish a new black capitalist class collapsed in that first episode, or one of the first episodes. But there are now some well-established African capitalists like Patrice Motsepe and his firms, Tokyo Sexwale, Cyril Ramaphosa, there's Wiphold, and there are a number of others. But in the main, they're a minuscule part of the capitalist class, and in many cases, those that are emerging are part of a bureaucratic bourgeoisie, not so much these ones, although they do depend on licenses from the state. But those who've emerged through government contracts, through tenders, things like this, have often been part of processes that have not helped the poor at all. And I think one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, has the government not got some power to influence the trajectory of the black capitalist class in a way that forces them to create jobs, for example? If you say to people who want a tender, we will favor those who have within their business plan labor-intensive activities. In other words, you tie in incentives and you tie in disincentives. That if it is highly capital intensive, you are less likely to get this contract than otherwise. And my impression is that the ANC before Zuma emphasized that there's nothing wrong with getting filthy rich, or that one didn't get into the struggle to be poor, but has not tried sufficiently to influence the trajectory of black capital. Now, it doesn't have the same influence over big, predominantly white capital, but it could have influenced these more. In general, I can't say that black capital has had more sympathy for the poor, as evidenced by the directors in Lonmin and many other cases. I don't think that there is this natural empathy for them, and it's evidenced in the way in which they've conducted their businesses, which have not created more jobs, any more jobs, than have white capital, as far as I can see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about continuing national oppression in South Africa.